Welcome dear friends to yet another lecture on postmodernism. Now in the last lectures we tried to describe a parody, a pastiche, simulacra and virtual reality, and in this video, in our class today, we shall try to understand another concept called black humor. Black humor. Now what is black humor? Black humor or black comedy is also known as dark comedy or gallows humor. Now it is a comic style in which the subject that is generally considered as a taboo, is made light. Now this makes light those subjects that are normally considered serious or painful to discuss. Now popular themes of this genre include death and violence, murder, suicide, abuse, domestic violence, graphic violence, rape, torture, war, genocide, terrorism, corruption, discrimination, racism, sexism, or diseases like anxiety, depression, drug abuse, mutilation, disability, terminal illness or insanity, or sexuality like sodomy or homosexuality, incest, religion and barbarism, etc. Now all these above mentioned themes are generally considered as serious or painful to discuss. Such themes are made light, comic, using the genre called black comedy. Now what is the purpose of black comedy? So black comedy is a comedic style that makes fun out of taboo subjects, painful subjects. The goal of black comedy is to amuse by presenting something shocking and unexpected. Now while it is typically used for mere shock value, it can also be used to provoke serious thought and discussion about the topics people may not want to talk about otherwise. So comedians often use it as a tool for exploring vulgar issues, thus provoking discomfort and serious thought as well as amusement in their audiences. So that is the purpose of black comedy. Now let's talk something about the origin of the term. The literary critics have associated black comedy, black humor, with authors as early as the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks like Aristophanes. So dark humor has been around since there have been stories to tell. However, an official black humor definition has only been around for less than a century. The term black humor was coined by the surrealist theorist André Breton in 1935 while interpreting the writings of Jonathan Swift. Now, Breton coined the term for his book Anthology of Black Humor, in which he credited Jonathan Swift as the originator of black humor and gallows humor, particularly in his pieces, the pieces of Jonathan Swift like Directions to Sermons, which was written in 1731, a Modest Proposal which came in 1729, a Meditation upon the Broomstick which was published in 1710, etc. So in his book, Breton also includes excerpts from other 45 writers. He cites examples in which the wit arises from a victim with which the audience empathizes, as is more typical in the tradition of gallows humor. Or he cites examples in which the comedy is used to mock the victim. In examples in which the comedy is used to mock the victim's suffering is trivialized, which leads to sympathizing with the victimizer. Sigmund Freud, in his 1927 essay Humour, he puts forth the following theory of black comedy. Sigmund Freud, he would state thus: the ego refuses to be distressed by the provocation of reality, to let itself be compelled to suffer. It insists that it cannot be affected by the traumas of the external world. It shows, in fact, that such traumas are no more than occasions for it to gain pleasure. So that is his theory about black humor, Sigmund Freud. Now black comedy is quite different from gallows humor. Even though black comedy and gallows humor are used interchangeably, there is a slight difference between the two, black humor and gallows humor. Whereas the black comedy is a relatively broader term covering humor related to many serious subjects, gallows humor tends to be used more specifically in relation to death or situations that are reminiscent of dying. So gallows humor is more about death. Now, there is also a difference between black comedy and blue comedy. Now, what is the difference between black comedy and blue comedy? Blue comedy focuses on the crude topics like nudity, sex, etc. Although the two are interrelated, blue comedy and black comedy is also different from straightforward obscenity, in that it is more subtle and does not necessarily have the explicit intention of offending people. In obscene humor or in blue humor, much of the humorous element comes from shock and revulsion, while the black comedy might include an element of irony or even fatalism. An archetypal example of black comedy in the form of self-mutilation appears in the English novel Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Sterne. Tristram, a 5-year-old at the time, starts to urinate out of an open window for lack of a chamber pot. The sash falls and circumcises the boy. His family reacts with both hysteria and philosophical acceptance. That is an example of black humor. What is the purpose of black comedy? As I have mentioned already, black comedy has the social effect of strengthening the morale of the oppressed and undermining the morale of the oppressor. According to Wilde Cipher, to be able to laugh at evil and error means we have surmounted the problem, we have surmounted them. So black humor juxtaposes horrifying elements with comical ones that underscore the senselessness of futility of life. Black humor often uses farce and low comedy to make clear that individuals are helpless victims of fate and character. So as I have mentioned already, the originator of the term black humor was the French surrealist André Breton. The term came to common use in the 1960s. The term black humor was applied to the works of Nathaniel West, Vladimir Nabokov and Joseph Heller. Now Catch-22, which was published in 1961 by Joseph Keller, which we have learned, is a notable example in which Captain Osirian battles the horrors of air warfare over the Mediterranean during World War II with hilarious irrationalities matching the stupidities of the military system. So that is an example. Other novelists who worked in the same vein included Kurt Vonnegut, particularly in Straight House 5, which was published in 1969, and Thomas Pynchon in 5, which was published in 1963, and Gravity Rainbow, published in 1973. A film exemplar is Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which came out in 1964. It is a comedy of militaristic errors that ends in global nuclear destruction. So my dear friends, in our lecture today we have talked about a genre called black comedy or black humor. We described what black humor is. It is a comedy or comic style that will make light the subjects that are generally considered as very serious, or subjects that are generally considered as a taboo. We talked about the origin of this particular term black humor. We talked about André Breton. We discussed the difference between what is a blue comedy and is a black comedy, etc. We also described some of the examples of black comedy. I hope you have understood the general meaning of this particular genre, black humor. Please do not forget to make a short description, short summary, or a paragraph description of this particular genre called black humor. Thank you for your patient listening. Please stay safe at home. Have a nice time.